What's up, gamers? Today I dug one of my favorite weapons in Destiny history up out of the vault, which is Whisper of the Worm. Even if you're not a huge fan of the playstyle that this weapon demands, I don't think there's any denying the incredible look and sound. One more time. Dude. And I personally love the high risk, high reward proposition that this gun gives, requiring its user to be precise to get the most out of it. Whisper has been on the fringe, just below good for quite a while now. Personally, I attribute this to its dominance back in year 2, getting it toned down as a result of that, as well as Divinity making the requirements for maximum effectiveness a lot more manageable than it once was, thanks to Divinity's crit bubble. Divinity is still in the game, of course, and is still quite good, but it did get nerfed not too long ago. Linear fusion rifles, Whisper's main competition, got nerfed a little while ago, and snipers on the whole, including Whisper, have been getting buffs steadily here and there over the last year or so, with a 10% damage buff coming out pretty recently with the launch of Season of the Deep. Not to mention, Whisper now has 80 airborne effectiveness, so you can 360 no-scope jump shot during your DPS phases. So where does Whisper's damage sit right now? Well, I'm going to back up a little bit first, since I bet there's a fair amount of you that weren't around during this gun's heyday. Whisper's main sauce is in the perk White Nail. White Nail gives Whisper higher base precision damage. This is important to specify because if you're just hitting body shots with a normal special ammo 72 RPM sniper or with Whisper, they actually do very nearly the same damage. But instead of having a roughly 3x precision multiplier like most snipers do, Whisper has roughly a 3.6 times precision multiplier. The second half of the perk states that rapidly landing 3 precision hits will refill the magazine. This refill happens mostly from reserves, but pulls one shot out of thin air exactly like triple tap does, which boosts your ammo economy and is just all around very good. The second part we care about is the catalyst, giving us the new perk Whispered Breathing, which is basically a souped up version of the perk Box Breathing. Scoping in with Whisper without firing for a moment grants even more bonus precision damage, up to a more than 5x precision multiplier for as long as you remain scoped in, which, when combined with White Nail, can be until the damage phase ends or you run out of ammo, provided you're hitting your shots to get the refills. Normal old vanilla box breathing only gives this effect for a single shot, but Whispered Breathing stays active for every shot, which is great. With all of these buffs active, Whisper is hitting for 50,522 damage on this Lost Sector boss at 72 rounds per minute. I already mentioned that linear fusion rifles are going to be Whisper's main competition, since they are both made to fill the role of precision-based, high-efficiency, high ammo economy DPS weapons. A Cataclysmic, buffed only by boss spec, hits for 45,296, a bit less than Whisper, but with Cataclysmic's damage perk bait and switch up, this number increases all the way up to 61,150, which is a bit more than Whisper. Whisper shoots at 72 RPM though, giving us 60,626 DPS purely off of the base damage and the rounds per minute. Compare that to Cataclysmic, which shoots at 57 RPM without any charge time altering perks, that is, which gives us 58,093 DPS, which is a little worse than Whisper. Is it back? Is Whisper back? It actually gets even worse for the linear, in fact, because this DPS would be assuming that you had bait and switch up permanently, which is not the case. It also assumes you never have to reload the linear, which is also not the case. So Whisper is actually even further ahead in DPS. Now hold on though, hold on just a second. When we add in relevant surges, a 30% debuff, and a Well of Radiance, Whisper's DPS remains very easy to calculate because the perk makes things very simple, since we never need to reload and our damage doesn't fluctuate. We get to 120,684 DPS with all of these buffs active. With the linear, when we add in the extra time for what I would call a normal bait and switch swap and add in the extra damage from the weapons being used to proc bait and switch, we'll be somewhere in the 100,000 neighborhood, depending on what gun you're using to proc bait and switch, how fast your handling is, and how fast your reload is. And at certain points in the rotation, it can be a tiny bit higher or lower depending on the length of the damage phase, but never above the 120k we're getting for Whisper, that's for sure. So wow, okay, this is actually very in line with how DPS tends to work in this game though. The trade-off is sustain and total damage versus DPS. A common damage strategy currently is rocket launcher dumping buffed by Gallarhorn, which will usually be in the neighborhood of 140,000 DPS or even higher depending on your exact rocket roll and rotation, a little lower if you miss rockets or your rotation's poor or whatever. But it has much less total damage than something like a linear, which has 40,000 or so less DPS roughly, but almost double the total damage. With Whisper, we're getting 20,000 better DPS than the linear, so right in between the two. So where does that put our total damage at? You would think it would be somewhere in the middle, right? So with Whisper, we get 24 shots in reserves, assuming we rallied with triple solar reserves, or 18 if we don't. White Nail will be increasing our reserves through the triple tap functionality by either 10 or 8, assuming we land all of our shots. We will assume that we did rally with reserves because it's just very easy to rally with a reserves chess piece on and swap off. And also because I assumed you rallied with reserves for the rocket and the linear. This puts our total effective reserves, assuming we don't miss, at 34. If we've got Whispered Breathing up the whole time, and again, don't miss any shots, our total damage is just 50,522 times 34 for 1,717,748 total damage. This isn't including surges, well, radiant, anything like that, since the damage strategies we're talking about stand to benefit from all of those things equally. So we have Cataclysmic at about 100,000 DPS and about 2.2 million total damage. Then we have Whisper with about 20% better DPS at 120,000 and 1.7 million total damage. And as it just so happens, 2.2 million divided by 1.2, so 20% is 1.8 million. So we're trading 20% more DPS for 20% less total damage. It's a pretty simple proposition there. When we move up to the rocket, 140,000 DPS, 1.3 million total damage. This is the trade-off. This is how this works, or is supposed to work. More DPS, less total damage. More total damage, less DPS. So the way we apply this information to things like raids and dungeons and whatnot is like this. Assuming you can get all of your ammo back in between damage phases, you just go for the highest total damage option that can get all of its ammo off in whatever damage phase you're doing. You can get rid of 10 rockets with a Clown Field Prep Hothead in like 15 seconds. You can get rid of all of your Whisper shots in about 28 seconds. And Cataclysmic will take 50 seconds up to a full minute to empty completely, depending on your rotation. This would be the only thing to consider, just this sort of relationship here, if it weren't for the fact that, thank God, boss damage phases can often be dynamic and require more than just sitting and delivering. Taniks from Deepstone Crypt, for example, is essentially a series of 15-second damage phases because of the boops. You have 2 phases if you did 2-bomb and 3 if you did 4-bomb. Caretaker and Explicator are essentially 3 roughly 10-second damage phases. Some bosses can be very difficult to crit as well without something like Divinity. Rolk from Vow is a good example. And all of these factors to me play an even bigger part in the equation than the numbers do. Rockets work pretty much everywhere because they don't rely on crits. Whisper and Linears both really need to crit to be competitive, and Whisper needs to scope in before the damage phase to proc Whispered Breathing to be competitive. And this is what holds Whisper back from just being a clear choice for boss damage phases around that 30-second mark. For Taniks, even though the length of the phase is pretty good for Whisper, the boops mean you'll waste time not shooting in order to proc Whispered Breathing 2 or 3 times during damage. The boss phases that I feel work out the best for Whisper right now if you want to use it are Templar in Vault of Glass, Avarok in Grasp of Avarice, and Oryx in King's Fall. There are about a half dozen other damage phases where it's probably pretty good, but your mileage may vary due to a smattering of random usability reasons. So what's the point of all this? Well, bottom line, it's good. It's in line with the other top options. With most bosses obliterated by rockets in 5 seconds anyway, I'm not sure how much it matters, but I think this is relevant to keep in mind for some of the activities that might push you a little harder, maybe day 1 raids, master raids, whatever. Whisper is occupying a niche pretty much directly in between linears and rockets, and it isn't seeing widespread adoption and application because of its usability drawbacks. But hey, if you want to use it or you find a niche where it's good in, the damage is definitely there. And I know a lot of people, myself included, love this gun. But that's going to do it on Whisper from me for today. I hope you all enjoyed. Let's talk about Whisper in the comments down below. Like the video if you liked it. Subscribe for more Destiny content like this, and I'll catch you all next time. Deuces.